mama wanna go, but that's a no-no. Two-seater white beater, so I rode solo. Hitting corners, top drop on the 6-speed.
Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you got here safe. Well, you obviously did get here safely, but did you come on the London Tube, which you probably, many of you never travel on, where they wouldn't even put animals like that if you travelled on the certain lines? Anyway, so today we're starting, wow, miles away, China. And what with Brexit and everything else, which will go on forever, I gather, are there markets in China for you? And there are markets in China, and the man who knows all about that is Byron, Constable. Welcome.
Welcome. Okay, let me set up my mic. Okay, I'm just going to do a very quick overview of China then, and afterwards I'll let you sort of fire out some questions to me. So when you're ready. Just a quick introduction. So Avenue51 is the biggest online exporter of British consumer goods to mainland China. So we ship around about 1.5 million items from Britain, mostly by airship, to mainland China each year, which is about 45 million pounds retail value of goods. And one of the biggest brands that we manage, which a lot of you will relate to, is Waitrose, which has been a very, very successful case study for us. Now, the first question is, why should you bother if you are a brand? Why should you even bother considering China? Well, the first thing is just the value of the food market. So China is now the 8th biggest export market for UK food and drink now, and it's only growing more and more larger each year. Over £560 million worth of food and drink was bought by Chinese consumers in mainland China the last year. So, firstly, is it worth going to China? Yes, it is. I think we've answered that question. The second thing is, if you are going to China, the first consideration most people is that we need a distributor. Now, the challenges with working with a distributor in China is that you come under a lot of constraints. The distributor will suddenly order lots of product and won't give you a lot of lead time. You have no visibility over how your brand is being presented in mainland China, which is probably your company's biggest asset. And secondly, you have no control or visibility over how people are marketing or sharing enthusiasm for your brand in China, which again is very important to be successful. And thirdly, one of the most critical things is you're locked into a long-term exclusivity deal with the distributor, which means that if things are going really well after a year and a half, you're probably constrained to working with somebody who controls sales channels and marketing in a way that probably you wouldn't want it to be working. So there are constraints. This was invented hundreds of years ago, the distributor model. There is a more modern way of working. And this is what we call the cross-border. It's online retail model. It's what the most innovative, the most progressive British food brands are adopting right now. They're moving away from the distributor model and they're taking on the cross-border online retail model. Why? It's because that they can take control over their brand. They have complete visibility. They have all the benefits of actually working with a distributor, except that they control it directly themselves. So you're sitting here in the UK, you can have an online retail strategy operating in mainland China completely by you. You have a coordinator that does everything for you, but essentially you are completely in control. You don't have a third party in mainland China who has control over your brand. So this is why the more progressive and the most successful brands are adopting this cross-border model, and I'll explain the mechanics of how it works in a few seconds. The cost. This is the first thing that strikes most people. Is actually the cost of actually running an online retail model in China is actually not as expensive as it was a few years ago. A few years ago, we estimate the cost was about £90,000 a year if you had a brand and you wanted to go to China and operate directly, have an online retail model and sell to lots of online retailers. Now in 2019, it's dropped to about £13,000. So look at it. For the price of getting an intern or some sales assistant working in your shop in some high street, it's you could actually have your complete operations in mainland China going, and you could be operating in about 30 or 40 online retail stores. So this is why the transitions happen so quickly, is that the costs, the logistics cost and the cost of all the automation for doing this has plummeted massively as companies have become really innovative in this space. And so it's more affordable now than ever, and I'm sure it'll only become more so. Okay, so it makes sense to drop one of your sales assistants and have a full-blown China operations. But what about the future? Is it worthwhile investing? So this is the latest report that's come out. It shows that the cross-border e-commerce transactions from China, so this is Chinese shoppers ordering from overseas, we'll estimate around about $3.5 trillion in the next few years. So yes, it is going to move in your direction. People will only buy more of your product. So here's the nuts and bolts of how it works. How does cross-border online retail work? Well, it's about technology. It's about automation at the center. This is a typical cross-border interface or a dashboard that you would get as a brand owner. And it shows you every single day which products are selling across a network of 100 different online retailers in mainland China. So we use this type of dashboard for brands that are operating 5 to 10 million pounds in mainland China. And again, every single day they're logging in. The CEO seems to log in about 30 or 40 times a day. But every single day they're logging in and they're seeing exactly how many transactions happen that particular day from which particular online retailer. As if you have complete control over what's going on. It's no different to being on Amazon and controlling the American market or the European market. It's become that straightforward. Okay, so the nuts and bolts, I'm going to walk you through it quickly. Okay, so E51 is the name of our platform, but there are multiple cross-border platforms out here, but this is exactly how they should all work. Essentially, the first thing you do is don't make the mistake of assuming that you know which stock will sell in China. Your SKU list is completely wrong, whatever you select. Make that first assumption. So what you do is you send it to your cross-border platform provider. They will talk to the online retailers about which product range that you should be selling, and then they will come back to you and tell you exactly what your SKU list should look like. We made this massive mistake with Waitrose at the beginning, that we decided that we were going to select a range of products that were the Dutchy range, which is very, very prestigious, has the British royal warrant. When we took it to the market, very few people were interested in it. We accidentally put honey up on that list, which we didn't think would sell very well because honey is already available in China. Honey, we've actually changed the term. We call it honey commerce right now. We're about to sell around about, I think we're about to hit 1 millionth bottle of honey sold cross-border to Chinese shoppers in mainland China. So you can see your assumption is completely wrong. If you start off with that, it's probably the wisest way to tackle China. Let the Chinese online retailers tell you what to sell. Okay, now the next part is you actually, with a cross-border platform, you get multiple fulfillment centers. So you would get one typically in England that you could move stock to. You get a couple in mainland China, so you get in Chengdu, Guangzhou, etc. So your stock would be available for online retailers to sell in mainland China. Now, you need to consider these fulfillment centers as your fulfillment centers. So add a field and say, we have a fulfillment center in mainland China right now, because your stock will be sitting there. And it's critical because the online retailers in China, if the stock's not on hand, they don't want to sell it. They want to know that if suddenly an influencer goes crazy and is selling a particular product, that it will be shipped out that second. So we have an obligation that when an order comes in, that second the product is actually on its way to mainland China. And remember, for us, we have a 747 of cargo, I think quarter filled up with honey right now, but a 747 of cargo going to mainland China every single day. It was with British consumer goods, mostly food. So the next part that you'll be looking at, so your product is sitting in a fulfillment center ready to be sold instantly. The next part is the online retail network that you'll be selling through. So with any good cross-border solution provider would give you a network of around about 100 to 200 online retailers in China. These were very famous brands in China that a lot of people have never heard of here. Names like JD, Tmall, it's Xiaohongshu, it's Seku, Kawala. These are all some of the biggest names that people shop through in mainland China. Our particular network hits around about 600 million shoppers a day. There are some bigger, there are some smaller. But that's critical that what happens is that your platform will take all of your brand assets, translate them, and create product pages on all of these online retailers for you, so your products can be sold. So that's essentially the second part that you'll be going through. Here are some of the names of some of the platforms. So let's just dispel this myth. Tmall is not necessarily going to be your biggest online platform or your biggest online retailer. There is a brand called Koala, they're NASDAQ listed. They're actually a gaming company at the beginning. They're now one of the biggest online shopping destinations in mainland China for cross-border goods, so imported goods. We sell a lot, for example, particularly for Waitrose through Koala and Tmall. So you won't be familiar with a lot of these online retailers, but your platform will be recommending these ones to you. Now, there's 3 different types of online retailers in mainland China. The first one is called a self-operated store. It means that you own it, or the platform, your cross-border partner owns it. So we operate a store for Royal Mail. Yes, you think of Royal Mail as people that send parcels. In mainland China, they think of them as one of the biggest online retailers. The Royal Mail store has about 500,000 shoppers per month on their website. We operate it, we operate it under license for Royal Mail. And it's just a very great place for us to instantly get new brands onto, because it literally takes minutes for us to actually upload product information because we operate it for the Royal Mail. It takes a little bit longer to get approval for your brand to get on there because it's platform operated. It's operated by Tmall. The platform is a Tmall platform, but it's a fast way for us to get brands, British brands, into the China market and so on. Here's an example of a couple of the product pages. As you can see, honey, is there. This is one product page on our store. Now, if you're familiar with e-commerce, mostly the product pages on Amazon are very, very short, very condensed. We have to convince the shoppers in mainland China beyond any reasonable doubt that this is very authentic and this is a very sought after product. So you see all sorts of product information. One of the latest images that have just gone up there is the picture of some potatoes with honey on it. Now, what we found is that initially when we used the Waitrose images of toast with honey on it, the Chinese consumers weren't resonating. They didn't understand why you would put honey on toast. We swapped it to potatoes, sales soared. And now if you go on there, the latest picture is of a lady with her face drenched in honey. I don't know if you know about honey skin. Honey skin is huge in China. So the picture of this lady with honey on her skin has sold probably more honey than I would ever have believed. So again, you're learning from the Chinese shoppers and endlessly adapting the product page to what sells. Lily Charms, I just want to put that on there. This was a husband and wife that really weren't global expansion mega company. They suddenly got a massive following on China because this lady, who's essentially the owner of the company, is so genuine about her craft. When we shared all of that information in China, everybody wanted to buy her products. She's become a super sensation. Again, they've expanded by 50%, so they have 3 people in their company now. And their turnover is probably in the range of £500,000 retail. This Works is probably one of our biggest sensations. We took it over, it was very, very small. It's now in the region of, I think, upwards of £5 million retail turnover in China. Another very small British company that had a very simple concept that took off very well through the cross-border platform. They did not have any stock in China. They did not have any presence in China. In fact, Waitrose still do not have a single person in China in their revenues installment. So it just shows that the cross-border model really can work well without any requirement for any investment in China at all. So this is an example of the third type of online retailer. I told you the first one was self-operated, the second one was retailer operated. So it's a retailer that you're working with. The third one is actually, this is the retailer one, which is sells a lot of it. The third one is the platform operated store. So you would have the equivalent of Amazon. It was that might buy directly from you. In China, a lot of the platforms will also buy directly. They are turning into retailers. And this is an example of NetEase, which is one of the platform-operated stores that generates millions of pounds for the brands that we operate. So there you've done it. You've got your product in the fulfillment centres. You've got its your online retail stores all stocking your goods. Again, you haven't spent more than £1,000 a month at this stage. It was so it's not costing you a lot of money. Again, ditching that employee did really work. It's now the next part is the influencers. So you've got product pages, but having products sitting on shelves, even digital shelves, doesn't sell them. You need influencers to talk about it. And so this is where influencer marketing really becomes critical in China. In China, there's something, a lot of people do reference other people's opinions a lot, probably more so than they do in the West. So this is something you need to adapt to. On the left, if you went to one of the biggest social shopping, social commerce platforms and searched for Waitrose, you would have hundreds and hundreds of people talking about it. We ensure that happens. Because, if you look on the right, Nans, which is actually a very reputable, famous British brand, there are 4 posts, which means that when a Chinese shopper is actually referencing your brand, they will go to social commerce first. They will say, well, what are other people saying about it? And if they only see 4 references and not many people are talking about it, the chances of your success are much, much lower. So this is really where your investment starts, is that how do you invest in social e-commerce to make sure that your brand is being talked about? And it almost transcends advertising. It's the discussion about your brand which is more critical. Here's an example of how we did it in Paris. It was quite fun. We brought together influencers into a room. In less than an hour, this is how it happened. They came into the room, we said to them, okay, here's the deal. If you sell this product, we will give you 6% commission off of everything you sell. Here's the link, here's all the product information, it's all translated into Chinese. If you would like to stay here, sign this contract and we will start working together. Half of them left, the other half stayed there. We gave them free samples, they sat in front of selfie booths and they live streamed the products directly to shoppers in mainland China, their followers in mainland China. They built the product pages in less than 3 minutes because they had the assets with them. So in less than an hour, this brand was never known in China. In less than an hour later, they were selling. The products were all being shipped from the UK because with this particular case, we had the product in the UK. So that was in an hour. The end result, we sold about 3,000 of the packages of the products that were valued at around about £30 each. So you can see the generation of revenue and the continuation that's happened after that because people got the product and then started sharing their enthusiasm was tremendous. So it's an example. It doesn't have to be complicated. Get the influencers in the room. Now, one thing that you probably don't know is that in the UK, there's around about 80,000 mainland Chinese influencers living here that can have this kind of effect on the shoppers in mainland China. Particularly in places like Manchester, Birmingham, we actually have whole operations there, particularly for influencers like this. So you do a small event, you invite them in, you essentially strike up a deal with them, and you give them everything they need to essentially sell your product, and it works very, very well. So this is the part where really you're investing your money. To give you an example, an average brand will invest around about £15,000 in a year to get one of their products to be generating about £10,000 worth of retail value a month after that. So even when they stop investing after that 1 year, they still continue to sell about £10,000 worth of retail for the next month over the entire year. So the return on investment generally makes sense. So there it is. You've got a sensational product. Everybody loves your brand. They're buying it. How do you get paid, which is always your biggest concern? It's the way that it works is that with most platforms, including us, the cross-border platforms, is that every single second when a transaction happens, the transaction comes across to you, you can see it, and essentially at the end of the month you just get a list of all the transactions and you're asked to invoice us or the cross-border platform. You get paid in pounds sterling, guaranteed in 30 days. So if your cross-border platform does not operate that, they're not competitive. Okay, so what you're doing is you're guaranteed your cash flow, regardless of the issues with online retailers in China or a renminbi crisis or whatever happens. It's that you do get your cash every single month. So it allows you really to sustain the expansion of your business. Okay, the complicated part, shipping, hate that, right? Clearing customs, completely gone. You don't have to think about that anymore. When you work with a professional cross-border platform, including ours, everything's gone. So we have a logistics center, it was here, that packages everything up. It has customs track, so it goes through mainland China. It all clears customs for you. It's all paid for you, so you don't pay any customs clearance. It's and also it's door-to-door, including the customer service on the other end. So as a brand, you just you focus on your brand. You make an amazing brand, you get it into the fulfillment center, and completely everything else has disappeared for you. accept the money. So, as I said, this is exactly an example of a dashboard, and I'm going to finish off quite now, but there's lots of case studies that I can send you if you just want to send me a message. I can send you Ella's Kitchen, which we built. It was we were the foundations of Stelton, which is a massive brand for homeware brands, etc. Aspinall of London, which was very, very quickly sort of adopted. So just send me an email. I'm not going to take any more time, but if there are any questions, please fire them to me.
Well, that was really interesting. And I mean, can I ask you one simple question first?
Yeah.
Maybe on behalf of many people here. This time last year, we had Ocado here, one of the top men in Ocado, and they said, well, we take small amounts from producers, test them, but they take small amounts. Would that be possible for a smaller organisation to sell into China?
Absolutely, no, it's a good question. Most brands consign around about £2,000 retail value of stock to the fulfilment centres over the first quarter, and we have, because we manage around about 100 different brands, that we have this visibility over and projections, algorithms over what your next quarter sales should be. So what we normally do is that we don't suggest that you hold more than 3 months, but normally it's about 2 months of stock in the fulfillment centre, which is, as I said, at the beginning it's about £2,000 retail value, but if you have a very successful quarter, we give you projections and we suggest that you move more stock in there just to be able to continue to fulfil on the demand from the shoppers. But yes, it can start very small.
Question, right, good. Start. The light is terrible.
Thank you very much. My name is Pedro.
Hello.
An interesting question which arises from this conversation is what about checking the pricing levels? Because I would assume that the pricing level in China would not necessarily be the same one as in the UK or in Europe for that matter.
That's a very good question. Pricing is probably one of the most critical parts to building your brand in China. Firstly, we normally recommend that your UK RRP and your China RRP are as close as possible. The reason that you want that is because the Chinese shoppers will reference your British or your European pricing, and if they find that there's a discrepancy which is too high, that what they do is they procrastinate. They start to say, "Oh, maybe I'll wait till I go to China, I'll go to the UK, or I'll ask a friend to buy it." They are price conscious. So our suggestion is never actually raise it more than 10% over the UK RRP, because you'll have a floor. It does lead on to another question, which is really, really relevant, though, also about your pricing in the market. So when you go on to Tmall or Taobao, which is the equivalent of eBay in China, you can see the pricing for any of your brands that are medium-sized brands. They'll be selling on there at different prices because people will be shipping them in, etc. You have to police that. Again, it goes to your most valuable customers don't want to think about where's the cheapest place to buy your product and most reputable. They just want to go to a few online retailers, find it, and then buy it. And you want to make that to happen as well. So really, your cross-border platform partner should be policing your entire pricing strategy across all of the, what we call the MAPs, major applications and platforms. If they're not doing that, then you really need to kick them a little bit, because it's an expectation, it's a basic expectation right now for any brand that's entering the China market. So pricing is critical. Thanks for asking that.
More questions? Just put your hand up and we'll bring the microphone to you.
Hello. What happens if you already have a network of distributors in China? Can you switch to, can you have both? Can we?
The easiest answer is you're stuffed.
Right.
Yeah, it's the question was if you have a distributor in China, can you have also a cross-border? In most cases, no. I don't recommend that, just because there's conflict that happens. The best way is just to either decide that you're going to go for a distributor and give them everything, control, or else do the new retail model, the new distributor model, which is an alternative way of doing it. There are hybrids that we've worked with where there are distributors that only manage offline supermarkets, for example, and we manage the online. But conflict does arise. Products being sold out the back door of the stores, etc., and it complicates things. So yes, you can do both, but if you want to really, really move fast and have control, we recommend you just choose one or the other.
Any more questions? Just put your hand up. Another one here. The microphone will come to you.
What about the product labels? Do you need to localize them?
That's a very good question. No. Okay. Firstly, it was if you do not need to put those Chinese product labels when you're doing cross-border e-commerce. It's going through essentially cross-border channels, which enables us to not follow any of the traditional import channels that you use for containers or traditional trade. So no, you need. Also, we can import organic food. So a lot of the food that a lot of the products that we export to China for Waitrose is organic, which if you went through traditional channels you couldn't export. So we generally don't get we don't have to follow animal testing routes as well. So that's one of the reasons that a lot of beauty products still go through these channels, is because unlike traditional channels where you are subject to possibility of animal testing, that's not the case. It was through the channels that we work with cross border. So there are a lot of benefits, which is you just get you up and running very, very quickly. It's a good question. Thank you.
More questions? Let's put your hands up. No? Any questions?
Yeah. The only last question that I normally get
Could I
asked is...
I'll ask you one question, because I go to the UAE a lot, where I'm going tomorrow at dawn. As an agricultural journalist, I work there a lot. And everyone there, if you want to do business with the UAE, they advise you to go over there, because dodgy things can happen otherwise. Is it wise to go to China? I mean, it's quite expensive, but is it a good investment to do? And at what point should you do it?
Okay, it depends how I guess important you are in a company. It was because I always think that as a CEO of a company, there's so much more to focus on, like team building and everything. Yes, it's great to get to China. No, it's not essential. It's the way that it works, particularly with our service and most other cross-border services, is you do get allocated a very talented coordinator who will advise you and give you visibility. We actually have two of our amazing coordinators here right now. And they're I mean, I think they've all got multiple degrees. They're far more intelligent than I am, and they will be the ones that will give you that lens in order to be able to see China the way that a Chinese shopper would see it. The biggest mistake that even I make, and I've lived in China for almost 20 years, so I haven't lived in England very much, so I apologise for my accent. What I find is that you tend to interpret things through the way that you look at things, and that's, I think, is the biggest mistake. It's the only thing that you really need to uphold is the integrity of your brand. And there's an interesting fact that I think every single year there's about £100 million worth of children's food, essentially infant-related, mother and baby food, that gets exported from Britain to mainland China, and most of those brands are not British, and most of those products are not made in Britain, which suggests something about the integrity and sort of the name British, is that we can be one of the biggest exporters of food that's not necessarily ours. So really the only thing that I suggest is you focus on is your British heritage, your ethics. It was the way that you build your brand, and stand by that very strongly, because nowhere else in the world can people compete with that. And I find that that's the greatest strength when we're building brands in China, is that they are British, and the trust that comes along with that probably supersedes many of the other aspects of the brand, and is probably one of your most affordable sort of assets that you have. You're British. It's worth billions. It's go out there and play with that. So that would be my suggestion if you were deciding on going to China and spending a lot of time there and trying to learn the culture, or actually focusing on your products. I would definitely focus on the product. But if you're going to read a book about Chinese culture, now that's one thing I recommend. There's a book called The Three Kingdoms, Sanguo Yanyi. It's a book, it's the classic iconic book. And if you read that book about Chinese culture, you'll understand how Chinese businessmen make decisions, and women, make decisions, and that will help you sort of, as your brand turns into a multi-million pound brand, because you'll be dealing with much bigger decision makers. So that would be I guess that was probably, when I went to China, that was probably the greatest advantage that I had. It was learning the culture almost from a sort of literature point of view, just because every single Chinese person has read this book and relates to it, and a lot of the way that their behaviour happens is a way the culture of this book.
Well, thank you very much, Byron. We've
Yeah,
got to end
sorry.
there because we have to
No,
move
you've got
on
enough.
to the next speaker. But that was amazing. We could have done all morning, I think. Well,
Okay,
there's huge business out there, isn't there?
Yeah, no, there
and
is.
it's wonderful. And you ended on a very good note about Britain, being British. And,
That's it. Think British.
well, I hope so after this week.
It's true.
Whatever. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Byron
great.
Constable.
Thank you.